All right, welcome back. This is going to be a summary for my nines. I'm sure that the video camera effect is going to be quite horrible here because I really have no training in this. I don't think anybody does. We're going to look at Canada's democracy. This is a summary of the 3-minute citizen videos that we watched during our lesson on Canada's democracy. So one visual that we have here is Canada's democracy. We can look at Canada's democracy, and it can be described in many ways. One way it can be described is that we are a monarchy. We have a queen that is the head of state. But she's a figurehead because we are a special kind of monarchy called a constitutional monarchy, meaning all laws are subject to the Constitution, and the power of the queen is also subject to the Constitution. So her power is more ceremonial. She is quite busy, so she's represented in Canada by the Governor General, and the job of the head of government, therefore, is taken up by the Prime Minister, and we'll find out in a minute how that is determined. We do have 3 branches of government in Canada, the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. The system itself is called a representative democracy, meaning that we vote for individuals at 3 levels, and we'll talk about what the 3 levels do for us and how the votes work in a moment. The elected assembly federally is called the House of Commons, and our roots come from the British parliamentary system, where Parliament was the wish of the people to have more influence over politics. So, one thing that the students are needing to do is figure out how we might be able to reform Canada's system and make it more democratic. So one other consideration is, well, how do the people express their will? And they express their will by voting. So we're going to look at the voting process and elections in Canada. So the purpose of elections is to hold the government accountable. We vote. Who gets to vote in Canada? Well, it is restrictive by age and by citizenship, but it was historically more restrictive than it is today. So groups like women used to be prohibited from voting, as too were Catholics and different Indigenous groups, but now they are allowed to vote. One misconception might be that the amount of popular vote that you get equals the number of seats you have, but instead we have 338 individual ridings, and what we do is we have 338 individual horse races, and in these horse races we have basically the first closest to the post will win. We have multiple parties, and therefore when you have a riding with, say, 5 parties, you don't necessarily need to have 50% of the vote to win the riding. The party with the most seats becomes government, and the leader of that becomes Prime Minister. There are at least 3 different types of governments that we could have. We could have a majority government if 50% plus 1 of the seats, so 178 of those ridings are controlled by one party. We may have a minority government if it's less than 50%, or something that happens a lot in Europe but hasn't happened in Canada yet. We may see a coalition where 2 or more parties may decide to have a temporary alliance so that they can get common objectives solved. Next up, we're going to look at how do you get to run in an election. So for that, we're going to go over here. To run in an election, you have to get nominated. You could decide to go as an independent, or you could run under the banner of a party. There are 4 major national parties, and the benefit of running as a party is they give you support, they give you a platform that makes it clear as to what your vision is, and they give you money. And it may cost up to $100,000 in your riding to get elected for campaign signs and things like that. The supporters will do that, knocking on the door, the feet on the ground work for you, and the platform is your pledge to the people of what you promise to do if elected. There are some restrictions in Canada worth noting in terms of the campaign financing. Any individual can only give you $1,200 for your campaign, and no corporations or unions can contribute to your campaign. Next up, we need to look at political parties. There it is, political parties. So, why do we have political parties? Well, on a negative side, they do cause division among elected people. But on a positive side, it makes the job of the voters a lot easier. We can easier discern, what is the platform of this person running? Once we can connect it to one of the major political parties, then we know that party's platform. What we see is that the party with the most seats becomes government. The party with the second most seats becomes the loyal opposition in Canada. One of the problems with parties in Canada connects to party discipline. Party members have kind of torn loyalty at times between the wishes of the party, the wishes of the electorate, and their own values. In Canada, more so than any other country in the world, party discipline ends up being most often their choice. So party discipline can be seen as a flaw of democracy in Canada. Parties do make it easier to govern, and parties will meet to create resolutions about issues. So they'll talk and they'll try to channel their values through their platform. One last thing is, once elected, once these parties become governments, we have 3 levels of government. What do they do for us? And for that, we can look at this chart. It's pretty messy, I can definitely acknowledge that. But we definitely have our lives on a daily basis impacted by all 3 levels of government. Municipally, we have police, we have water, we have sanitation and sewage, we have public transportation, we have property tax, we have other local things like parks and libraries. Provincially, we have secondary education, post-secondary education, primary education. We have the management of healthcare, we have rent control, we have things like drinking age and minimum age and income tax that may be taken from you or will be taken from you. And federally, we have things that affect the entire country. Things like foreign policy and our military, our RCMP and food and drug regulation, and more income tax. Healthcare will be funded federally, but again, like I mentioned, managed provincially. And our borders are federally maintained. So international travel and traffic is a federal issue. So right now, our borders are somewhat closed because of COVID-19. That's a federal decision. So one province can't have a different policy and just say we are open to the world. Okay, so that's a summary of the videos that you can see at 3 Minute Citizen that we did for another look at this unit. All right.